Back in 1552, there was this one single, absolutely brutal battle that would literally change the map of Eurasia forever. It was a total clash of worlds, really, the climax of a 300-year-old rivalry, and it was the moment a regional power just exploded into a colossal empire. This is the story of the Siege of Kazan. Okay, just picture this. You're standing on the walls of a great city, and you look out and you just see a sea of men, 150,000 soldiers, a steel tsunami just rolling across the plains. A Tatar warrior, seeing this, supposedly said, "This isn't a regular raid. This is Armageddon." And wow, those words just perfectly capture the terror, the finality of what was coming. This wasn't just another fight. It was the end of an entire era. So, how did we get here? I mean, to really understand why 150,000 men were marching on this one city, we have to rewind the clock a lot. Because this story, it doesn't start in 1552. It starts centuries earlier, with a name that struck fear into the hearts of Russian princes for generations. The Golden Horde. For generations, these guys were the masters. They were the descendants of Genghis Khan, and their cavalry was just unstoppable. They burned cities, they demanded tribute in both blood and treasure, and they basically turned all the Russian principalities into their personal vassals. This wasn't just a military occupation, it was this deep psychological shadow that hung over Moscow for centuries. But, by the 15th century, the Great Golden Horde, like all massive empires, started to crack. It began to fragment. And this wasn't some clean break, it was a slow, messy shattering. From that wreckage, powerful new successor states, they're called Khanate, emerged, and every single one was vying for power. And for the rising principality of Moscow, the most dangerous, the most resilient of them all was the Khanate of Kazan. And this right here, this really lays out the core of the conflict. For Moscow, Kazan was a constant, humiliating problem. I mean, year after year, Tatar raiding parties would sweep into Russian lands, not just to steal stuff, but to capture people, tens of thousands sold into slavery. This wasn't some byproduct of war, it was the engine of Kazan's entire economy. At the same time, Kazan controlled the Volga River, which was the absolute lifeline of trade and power in the whole region. If the Golden Horde was a dragon, Kazan was its last and sharpest venomous fang. And believe me, they had tried to pull that fang. 10 separate times, Russian armies marched on Kazan. And 10 times, they came back defeated. They were outmaneuvered in the forests, starved by bad logistics, or just flat out broken by the fierce Tatar cavalry. Kazan just seemed invincible. And for Moscow, this wasn't just a strategic objective anymore. It had become a national obsession. But then, a new leader comes to power in Moscow. A young man, crowned when he was just 16, who decided he wasn't going to be just another grand prince. No, he would be a czar, an emperor. His name was Ivan IV. And history? Well, history would remember him as Ivan the Terrible. He had seen all the past failures, and he knew that just using brute force wasn't enough. He was going to wage a completely new kind of war. And this is crucial. Ivan didn't just raise a bigger army. He raised a smarter one, built around this brilliant three-part strategy. He fundamentally rethought his soldiers, his weapons, and his logistics. This is how he planned to succeed where 10 previous attempts had failed. So first up, he created the Streltsy. Think of them as Russia's first special forces. These weren't nobles on horseback, they were professional paid infantry. They wore these brilliant red uniforms, they were trained year-round, and their signature weapon was the bardiche, a terrifyingly huge axe that also doubled as a perfect stand to rest their firearm, the arquebus. That made them deadly accurate. This was a total game changer. Second, Ivan embraced technology. Big time. He put together an artillery train of 150 cannons. Now, for the mid-16th century, this was just an astonishing amount of firepower. And these weren't just for show, they were the heart of his plan. He brought in European engineers who knew exactly how to use them to systematically demolish fortifications that had resisted every single previous attack. The third, and honestly the most ingenious part of his plan, dealt with the single biggest reason for all those past failures: logistics. Even Ivan's own early campaigns had failed, not in battle, but because the 400-mile march was just a killer. So the thinking from his engineers was simple, but revolutionary. If we can't get our army to Kazan, let's just bring Russia closer to Kazan. So what they did was they built an entire fortress, Sviarsk, deep inside Russia. Then they numbered every single piece of wood, dismantled the whole thing, floated it down the Volga River, and reassembled it just a stone's throw from Kazan. Can you imagine the shock of the defenders, waking up to see a complete Russian fortress just appearing out of thin air? It was a logistical miracle, and it sent a very clear message. This time, Moscow wasn't leaving. But here's where the story gets really, really complex. If you're picturing this simple clash of Orthodox Russians versus Muslim Tatars, you've got to rethink the whole conflict. A huge portion of Ivan's most effective troops were Tatars themselves. The allied Kazan Khanate provided expert cavalry who knew the terrain better than anyone. High-ranking nobles from Kazan defected, bringing priceless intelligence. And incredibly, Shagali, a man who had previously sat on the throne of Kazan, was riding with Ivan's army. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a Tatar civil war layered right on top of a conquest. So, the stage is set. Ivan's got his new professional army, he's got his overwhelming firepower, and he's got his impossible forward base. In the summer of 1552, he launches his final campaign. The siege of Kazan is about to begin. And it would be brutal, methodical, and totally unlike anything the region had ever seen before. So, let's walk through the siege itself. On August 22nd, this massive Russian army arrives and completely surrounds the city. The 150 cannons open fire, a continuous thunder day and night. But Kazan's walls, they're made of thick wood packed with earth, and they stubbornly just absorb the punishment. Then, disaster strikes the Russian camp. An apocalyptic storm floods everything, turning the ground into a swamp. From the walls, the Tatars mock them, saying their gods are intervening. But Ivan, he rallies his men, and the siege continues. It becomes clear that simple bombardment just isn't enough. He needs another way in. And that was the crucial question, right? When the most powerful artillery train of the age can't breach the walls, what do? How do you break a defense that just will not fall? Well, Ivan had one more trick up his sleeve, a secret weapon that would attack the city from a direction no one expected. The answer was sappers. These were military engineers, and they were masters of a dark and dangerous art: digging tunnels. Ivan had hired a foreign expert, known in the Russian chronicles just as Butler, to lead this whole effort. So while the cannons roared above ground, Butler and his teams began a secret war beneath the earth. Now, this was terrifying work. In these cramped, dark tunnels, they dug inch by inch towards the city, knowing a collapse could bury them alive. First, they found and destroyed Kazan's secret underground water supply, a devastating blow that left tens of thousands inside slowly dying of thirst. Then, they placed their final charges, massive chambers packed with gunpowder right under the foundations of the main towers and walls. On the morning of October 2nd, the fuses were lit, and the first explosion, it wasn't just a sound. It was a concussion that ripped through the ground, a man-made earthquake. Then, one after another, the other mines detonated. Entire sections of the 30-foot-high fortifications just vanished into clouds of smoke and splintered wood. In a matter of seconds, the city was just broken open, and through these massive, smoking gaps, the Streltsies surged forward. The final, brutal assault began. The fighting moved into the streets, hand-to-hand, merciless, and desperate. By noon, Kazan had fallen. The fall of Kazan wasn't just a military victory. It was a turning point in world history. Seriously, it was one of those moments where you can truly say that after this day, the world was different. The balance of power in Eurasia had shifted permanently. I mean, this comparison says it all. It's night and day. Before Kazan, Moscow was a regional power, still kind of living in the shadow of the Mongol successor states. After Kazan, it became a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire. It was no longer a victim of raids. It was the conqueror, the new dominant force in the east. So what were the ultimate consequences? Well, first, the victory finally ended 3 centuries of Tatar dominance over the region. Second, with control of the entire Volga River, Russia's wealth and influence just exploded. And finally, the path to the east was now wide open, beginning the centuries-long conquest of Siberia. In so many ways, October 2nd, 1552 was the true birthdate of the Russian Empire. Ivan returned to Moscow a conquering hero, an absolute legend. And to commemorate this monumental victory, he commissioned a cathedral right on Red Square, a masterpiece of brilliant, colorful onion domes, a structure totally unlike anything else on Earth, which we now know as St. Basil's Cathedral. It stands today as a permanent memorial to the conquest of Kazan. But here's the final, fascinating twist. The famous onion domes of St. Basil's. They echo the very Tatar and Islamic architecture of the people Ivan had just conquered. This leaves us with a really provocative question. What does it mean when a conqueror builds his victory monument in the style of the conquered? Maybe it shows that from its very first day, the new Russian Empire was something complex, defined not just by brutal conquest, but by absorption and transformation.